All right, there we go. Hello everyone, how's it going? Team here, and this is BxJS Weekly, episode 138, bringing you all the best JavaScript news of the week in a podcast form. And today we do have quite a lot of really cool stuff, so, let's just get started. As usual, the first section of the week is getting started. We got 3 articles here today. First one is Docker build example, how to go from slow to fast Docker builds. So this specifically talks about building your Node apps inside of the Docker. The article itself is pretty straightforward. I think we had similar-ish articles quite a few times already now. In general, it's pretty good. There is one thing that I did not know about. So it talks about the build kit, which is the new building subsystem for Docker itself, which is something I didn't know exist actually. So apparently starting from the Docker version 18.9, you got the new build subsystem that is faster and better optimized for the build time and build size, as far as I understand. And for the moment, you have to opt into it. So apparently doing that cuts the time almost in half, which is just pretty mind-blowing, to be honest. So if you are building a lot of Docker images and wanted to speed up the process, do check out the article. There are some good tips. One note from my side is that I would basically recommend, instead of doing npm install production, to switch to npm CI, which is a lot faster, but have some side caveats essentially. So, you're doing that, make sure to test it first. Hey, Kenrick, welcome to the stream. All right, that's it for the first article. The next one we got here is from the web.dev team, entitled Measuring Offline Usage. This is something I did not know existed, essentially. Turns out there is a special Google Analytics version, I guess, that is working through the workbox module that allows you to actually measure analyze, I guess, the user behavior in your progressive web app in offline mode. So if someone installs it and uses it offline, it actually records all the analytics locally and then does the background sync whenever the user goes online, which, makes perfect sense when you think about it. But I never even thought that, this is something you should care about, basically. It makes perfect sense. But I guess, because I never really worked on the offline first apps or the apps that really had like any significant offline functionality, let's put it this way, I just didn't even think that this was a thing. So if you are working on progressive web apps and you needed to track your users in offline mode and, gather some analytics and stuff, do check this article out. It does a really good job of explaining how to do that. Right, and the last article we got in Getting Started section is Getting Audio Visualization. Why is this word so hard? Getting audio visualizations working with the Web Audio API. So this is sort of a deep dive into a Web Audio API and a / tutorial, I guess, that shows how to do this sort of the wave visualization coming from the Web Audio context. And it's surprisingly easy, actually. So there's just create an analyzer and then render whatever it analyzes into context, and you're basically done, which is a lot easier than I expected it to be, honestly. So if you wanted to ever do some sort of a audio visualization on the web, do check this one out. It's actually pretty damn good write-up. All right, that covers the Getting Started section. Hi, Malaf, welcome to the stream. Hi, Emmanuel, welcome to the stream. All right, continuing, we got articles and news section. We got 4 things here today, starting with, if not single-page apps, then what? So we already had an article from this author, I don't remember when exactly, it was like a few episodes ago, and it was titled Second Guessing the Modern Web. It talked about the sort of, the issues with the current toolkits and everything else, and this is a follow-up article that essentially talks, so the single-page application pattern is kind of broken right now, so what are the different approaches to doing that, right? And the article dives into different frameworks, different approaches, and different, patterns that you can use to build a rich web application. Let's call it this way, because it's not really a single-page app. The problem I have with the write-up, I get the points here. I get that all of that is valid pretty much, right? So the stuff like Remix, Redwood, or Blitz, Next.js, which is almost that like full stack framework, that you can do everything with. And then there's super light versions like turbolinks that essentially just preload the links for you. And then there's the server-side state frameworks, which is like super complex and work over the WebSockets, and I assume they are pretty hard to manage because I don't see them being too widespread. And then there's the progressive enhancement stuff. The thing is that I know that those are, kind of different approaches, but in my head, for whatever reason, I always considered them to be the sort of the way to progressive web apps. So while I understand the reasoning here, I view the whole ecosystem as just this one let's put it this way, just as a bunch of different ways to build the single page apps, right? Because in the end, what you're getting with Next.js, for example, is still a single page app because you don't have those transitions, right? So it might not, not all the time, but you can very easily build an SPA with the Next.js. But anyway, it's an interesting write-up nonetheless. So if you're curious about the state of the web frameworks, I guess, and different approaches to building the rich web experiences, then absolutely do check this one out. Hey Artemi, welcome to the stream. Hey Donna, welcome to the stream. Right, continuing, we got a pretty big write-up from Mozilla people titled MDN Web Docs Evolves, Lowdown on Upcoming New Platform. So this is a very in-depth approach. It's a very in-depth article describing what kind of approach the Mozilla team will take behind the for building the new MDN platform, right? So because the new MDN platform is going to be heavily driven by the community, and the community needs a way to contribute, they are essentially extending it with a GitHub repo that will host the content itself, so the users can basically contribute. And then they have like a bunch of other things that they do here. So the two images here summarize it pretty nicely. Before that, they had like a content delivery network that backed the Kubernetes cluster that did all the work basically. And then there's like MySQL and Elasticsearch for data and querying. And this time around, they're essentially adding the GitHub into the mix with Lambda functions that will precompile the results and S3 bucket that will, I assume, cache it. And it seems straightforward. Again, if you're curious, there's like a whole what is wrong with me today? There's a whole more details in this article, and if you're curious about the specific technical things or decisions, as you can see here, it's really, really big, and there's a very, very detailed discussion down below. So yes, if you're curious, do check it out. There's some really interesting things. I really love MDN as the platform for docs. In my opinion, it's like one of the best on the web. And I really hope they evolve it into something that is going to be sustainable and that is going to be of the same quality that the current MDN, because if it's going to disappear or, maybe, if it's going to be a bit less quality of content, it's perfectly fine because there's no longer a team of professional writers maintaining that, right? But if it's just going to disappear, it's going to be very sad, let's be honest, because the quality of the content it has right now is incredible. If they can maintain even half of that, that's going to be a pretty big achievement in my opinion. So there you go. That sounds interesting. Do check it out. Donna, thank you very much for your donation. Highly appreciated as usual. Right, continuing, we got another blog on github.com/readme project. So this is the project that interviews the maintainers and developers of large open source projects. And in this post, we have one of the core contributors to jQuery and core maintainers, as far as I understand. Which is, there's some fascinating stuff in here. Like, as much as people hate jQuery in 2020 for some reason, honestly still not sure why, it's still a valid library that you can just use perfectly fine for building some small apps and small websites and some dynamic functionality. Still a valid leap. And so the article basically is an interview with what's his name? I'm okay, I'm gonna try to read that, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna screw it up. It feels like it's read probably as Michal or Mihail, maybe? I'm not sure. It's like he's from Poland, so it's probably a Slavic thing. So Mihail is the Russian name, which is very similar to a lot of names the like Poland and Czech Republic have. But anyway, so it's pretty good write-up, some really cool stuff in here. I'm not going to spoil it for you, don't want to do any summaries. So if you're interested in that, I know this is a very specific topic, but if that's kind of curious how the life of someone who maintains such a large library goes, do check this out. There is some pretty cool stuff in here. Okay, continuing, we got the last article here for today. Humans are bad at URLs and fonts don't matter. Really cool write-up from Mr. Troy Hunt, who is probably one of the most active security researchers right now and security consultants, I guess. If you are, if you're even at least, what is wrong with me? Even if you are even a tiny bit interested in security, absolutely recommend following him, his blog or his Twitter or whatever. He does shares some really cool things now and then. And he also built the Have I Been Pwned website, which is absolutely invaluable in my opinion. So this article talks about URLs, right? So there's it spanned from this tweet from NordVPN that posted poll on Twitter that says which URL is fake, right? And there's 4 URLs here. Majority of people pick the URL with HTTP instead of HTTPS, I guess for the reason that it doesn't have an S there, which doesn't really make it a phishing website. It's like, okay, it's maybe a bit less secure than HTTPS, but whatever. Now, the problem is there's 2 google.com, and one of them is fake, as you might guess, right? So the question is which one, and just by looking at it, you cannot say. Like, humans are really bad at discerning this, right? If you change the font to serif, as the Troy here points out, then one of them becomes obvious, so that instead of L, you got the capital I, right? And this is how so it's actually googie.com, right? And some people argue that this is the problem that lies on the developers and problem that lies on the designers, so that they should pick basically a good font and a good representation of the URL so that people can discern it. And Troy argues that this is a very bad argument that doesn't actually hold, because there is non-Unicode, or actually Unicode characters, right, that look exactly the same as the English letters, but actually are different. So there's an example of Applecom and Applecom, and if you open both of them in the browser, you will actually, one of them is Apple, the other one is, okay, if you look in the browser bar, it translates it to this Unicode thingy, but it is like actually apple.com. So, and yeah, it's sort of ridiculous that some people think you can basically solve it by a proper typography encoding, in my opinion. But the solution to this is, of course, using a password manager that would fill out the passwords for you and can accurately match the URLs, because you don't have to do it yourself, right? So if you open a page and your password manager doesn't tell you that there is an autofill here, which means that the URL is wrong, right? And you cannot really autofill it, which means that someone is trying to scam you. So it's as easy as that. I'm guessing we're gonna get some sort of a solution in browsers that tries to tackle that, but again, it's really hard. Like, how the hell do you decide what is scam and what is not? I guess maybe with some machine learning you could probably try to do that, but that sounds like it's probably going to be a lot of false positives in there. But anyway, it's a fascinating topic, so if you're curious, do check out the article itself. Pretty good read. Hey Mikkel, welcome to the stream. All right, continuing, we got tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness section with quite a bunch of things here, to be honest. So let's start with the first one. There's a new thingy called Skypack, and the article is titled Introducing Skypack Discover. And essentially, the gist of it is that, hey, we got the NPM, which is an incredible package registry with literally millions of packages. There's some really cool stuff in there, but it's really hard to pick the tool or the library that fits your needs, right? So they give an example as like the moment.js for date manipulation. If you go into npm search and search for dates, the moment.js will be on top purely because it's one of the oldest, one of the most used, one of the pretty well maintained libraries, right? But the problem is it's no longer so it's basically on the live support now, right? So it's deprecated. It's no longer going to be updated. The only patches they're going to roll out are like critical bug fixes, which I imagine is not going to be that many of them. And what they're doing with the Skypack is they are doing the human curated search engine for packages. So instead of just, you know, showing you the results from search, they're actually going to be curating the packages. I'm still wondering how well will that scale and how much effort would that be to actually just physically sit there and look through all the packages and try to figure out, you know, which one is the best one. But yeah, this is what they pitch at least, right? So that there's going to be a human curated engine that would allow you to search and discover the best package for your specific case. We're gonna see how that turns out. I mean, I like the premise. I like I think human curation is pretty cool, and you know, it doesn't scale absolutely. Like this is gonna be a pain in the ass unless you crowdsource it, right? This is why stuff like Reddit ratings or anything else pretty much work to an extent, because if you allow others to rate things, it becomes a bit easier rather than having a team who would have to go through all of those millions of packages and decide which one is the best one, right? But yeah, anyway, it's an interesting experiment, and I'm kind of curious to see where that goes. All right, continuing, we got, so there's been this GitHub dmca thing with YouTube DL. I don't know if you heard about it or not. Not strictly JavaScript related, but essentially the RIA sent the dmca to GitHub to take down YouTube DL library because YouTube DL used a couple of musical videos in their tests. So they downloaded those videos in tests to make sure that actually the YouTube DL thing works, which is a ridiculous takedown request, and like it's just stupid. Like, okay, RIA is a garbage organization and all they do is mostly like absolute bullshit at this stage, but whatever. So someone decided to create a pull request. I mean, you could probably put it as to abuse the GitHub and the Git in general. And because the YouTube DL repo was taken down by GitHub, someone decided to send a pull request that essentially did a merge between GitHub dmca repo and the YouTube DL repo, which resulted in the full YouTube DL source code being available under dmca repo. And since it's still available, it seems like GitHub didn't actually do anything about that. The problem is it actually broke pull requests. So if you try to open that old pull request that has now been closed, last time it just like it never opened for me with GitHub repo basically, which was like, yep, that worked out well. And there's the guy here on Reddit that explains basically how he did that. It's absolutely silly, nothing super serious here, but it's kind of funny that, even though they did take down the repo, sending merge commit actually pulled out the source code, which means that taking down the repo doesn't mean that they take down the content of the repo, which is just an interesting fact, I guess. So there you go. Okay, next thing we got here is the experiments from Firefox on native CSS masonry layouts. So essentially the Pinterest and stuff, the layouts like this, you could probably soon do them with grid, which is kind of awesome. So essentially it allows you to just say, okay, I want to display grids. This is the gap and this is the layout masonry, repeat. This is the size of things, and you're basically done. And it automatically lays this out for you. If you ever try to implement something like this, you know how much pain in the ass it is. And having the browser do it for you sounds freaking amazing. So there you go. It would be really cool to see that shipped. Wondering if, if there's a spec or anything like that. Probably there is, and I just don't know about that. Again, I'm not a CSS guy, so that's pretty predictable, I guess. But yes, if you are curious, do check out the tweet and the thread that goes out of it. There's like a bit more info on that. So it's pretty cool in my opinion. All right, continuing, we got thread from Mr. Sindre Sorhus talking about Node 15. So the tweet reads is, Node 15 makes 7 of my packages obsolete, and this is a good thing. Now most of those changes are actually not denoted in the release notes for Node 15, and I didn't know about them before actually reading through this thread. Like, for example, there is now an asynchronous set timeout which you can await, which essentially, I always created my own sleep function from the new promise set timeout because it's just handy, right? You sometimes need to wait a bit before doing other asynchronous stuff, and it was just handy having this sleep function that you can await and be done with it. So now it lives under timers / promises, and you can just wait for set timeout, which is kind of awesome. So a board controller, this is something that was in the notes, obviously, some JavaScript additions, and a bunch of other promise related things, which is kind of awesome. So if you're curious about all of that stuff, do check out the thread. There is a lot of interesting info here. Again, Node 15 is a pretty damn good piece of code. All right, continuing, we got, we got this thing. So there's the write-up from the Mozilla people that reads as, so the quote is, Tom implemented the .item proposal in Firefox Nightly, but this feature had to be backed out after a few days because it caused various web compatibility issues. So people extending built-in APIs in browsers are breaking things again, essentially. So if you are like... Somebody decided it was a good idea to modify the array prototype with .item function, and essentially now the developers cannot add the proposal version of that, the new version, right? Because it breaks the web, and that is a big, big no-no, which means that, probably we're gonna have, like, the interesting thing is that the .item proposal very quickly got to stage 3, right? So it's now at stage 3, which means it's gonna be, if there were no issues, it would be shipped as probably ECMAScript 2021, right? And it looks like now they're probably gonna have to rename that .item because that just literally breaks a bunch of websites, which is so unfortunate. And this is why we can have good things, right? All right, continuing, we got next small cool thing. So the article is titled Sapper is Dead, What's Next in Svelte? So there was the Svelte Summit 2020, which is this conference basically surrounding the Svelte ecosystem. And Rich Harris apparently announced that Sapper v1 will never be shipped, and they're basically stopping the project. And it doesn't mean the Sapper will not exist anymore, but they are actually taking most of the functionality the Sapper has and merging it into the Svelte itself, which in my opinion is really cool. So if you never heard about Sapper, it's basically like Next.js for React or Nuxt for Vue, sort of this all-in-one framework where you could just create files and then you can, define your pages or routes or whatever in there, and the framework will handle everything else for you. And it seems like they are now planning to do this thing as the core feature of Svelte, which actually sounds really cool. So I really like this approach. I know it's basically heavily opinionated, but it is an approach that I personally like. So I am pretty intrigued to see how this Svelte will develop from now on, essentially, with killing off Sapper and merging most of those functions into the core. But yeah, if you're interested in more details, do check out the article. There's a bit more information in here. Okay. Last thing we got here is the introducing the NPM public roadmap and a new feedback process. So it's a write-up from the GitHub team, essentially, because NPM is now part of GitHub, as you might or might not know. And essentially, they are launching this public roadmap repository, and there's now public feedback process. So you can not only report bugs and issues, but you can actually give feedback on the upcoming features and plans that they have, which is pretty great. So I think NPM was not exactly transparent up until now, and it will be very interesting to see how this changes the development process for it. So there we go. All right, that's it for the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. Now we are coming to the releases, starting with StandardJS version 16. Actually, this is the second release of the week. The first one was version 15. That basically brought the support for ES 2021, as well as a bunch of different 2020 features and global variables from ES 2017, such as atomic, shared array buffer, and so on and so forth. And then 16 I think is what is it exactly about? I haven't had time to read through 16 because it was released yesterday, I think. No, 2 days ago. Okay, I somehow missed it. Anyhow, so it seems like it's mostly the different utility functions, and 15 is what's the core-related changes are, where the core-related changes are. So this is more utility-related things. I guess, what is the breaking feature? Why is it 16? When you upgrade, consider running fix. Maybe they're dropping the support or something. So ESLint 7, that's already been for quite some time. Their engine. I guess the engine is now the newer version, but whatever that means. I'm not sure. Like, why is there no description of why is it breaking? Anyway. So if you're using standard, do check it out. I mean, it's a nice minimalistic config, I guess, for ESLint. I do use it mostly. I do still use semicolons because I like them, but there you go. Right, next thing we got here is GraphQL Editor version 3.0. This is, as far as I understand, completely rewritten from ground up from React version of GraphQL Editor, unless I'm confusing it with something else that I've seen this week. Let me see, biggest release. Am I confusing it or not? I think I am confusing it with something. Anyway, so I actually haven't used GraphQL Editor. I think I've seen it a couple of times. It seems like an interesting like UI tool essentially for building GraphQL schemas and queries, but you know, being a guy who loves code a lot, I prefer to write my schemas and code in text rather than graphically. But I mean, I do see use for that. So, you know, if you are working with it, do check out the new release. Seems like they are added quite a bunch of pretty cool things. I think the automatically generated documentation is probably the most interesting thing for the internal projects, for example, or for the public APIs, because just taking your schema and getting automatically generated docs out of it is actually a pretty cool idea. All right. Next thing we got here is Node.js version 14.15.0. This is the first LTS version of Node 14. So if you're running on anything older than that, now is a good time to upgrade. So this is going to be supported until October 2021 for exactly 1 year. And it's going to go into maintenance modes after that and will be supported until April 2023, which is a very long time. And honestly, I don't see a reason not to update to Node 14 because it's been really great for quite some time now. So there you go. All right, next large release we got here today is Next.js version 10 that brings in a whole ton of features, including Next.js Analytics and Next.js Commerce. So those two features are actually, well, how do I put it? So they are, first of all, what's really cool is that they are part of open source version. So they're not exactly out of the box, like as in, you know, if you're using the Next.js Analytics part on Vercel, you just get analytics magically enabled, right? Which is really cool, don't get me wrong. But if you're using open source version, obviously you don't get the analytics from Vercel because they are, well, on Vercel. But what is cool is that they actually give you open source way to tap into the analytics gathering and then store it in your own backend, for example. So like if you're running it manually, you can actually throw it into, I don't know, Elasticsearch or whatever, right? And just use it yourself. So obviously your UI is not going to be as fancy as what they did for the Vercel. Makes perfect sense, right? But it's, in my opinion, it's really awesome that they actually allow you to basically use the same feature in a completely open source and free fashion. Obviously, you know, again, you have to manage and maintain your backend and your storage, but that's a different question. Right, yeah, Commerce, I haven't actually digged into Commerce side of it. So again, it's a Vercel feature more than anything. And it seems like super easy to set up, but I don't know if they allow the open source version of it. I'm guessing no, because it's more than just some shopping cart or whatever, right? Yeah, so there's a bunch of other features as usual. Fast refresh for MDX, which is super awesome. As well as, I don't know what other, yeah, oh yeah, they have the new Next image component, which now automatically optimizes images, which is super awesome. And just by using that instead of EMG can shave off quite a few seconds and improve performance in the Lighthouse if you are, you know, optimizing for that. So do check this one out. Again, yeah, it's a really great release, so do check this one out. Okay, last release of the week we got here is Recoil version 0.1.1. Yeah, they have not been exactly releasing too many versions since the original release, which was hell knows when, but this is, I believe, the first release since then, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am mistaken. I haven't actually checked the previous releases, but anyway, it's like a first major release, let's put it this way, which brings some performance improvements, experimental React Native support, which is kind of cool. Experimental atom effects, which allow you to react to atom changes, which is super awesome, to be honest. So this is like one of the features that could be a game changer for this library, in my opinion, as well as the snapshot testing outside of the React context, which essentially allows you to test selectors and atoms without bootstrapping the whole like React application, which is kind of great. If you never tried Recoil, do give it a shot. It's a really good small state management solution. Right, that's it for releases. Now we're coming to the libs and demos. We got a few of them here today. Some of them are pretty interesting. Starting with Lucia, the tiny library for tiny web apps. So this is sort of, yeah, as it says, it serves as a bridge between vanilla JavaScript and Vue. I guess it's, I wouldn't, like, it's sort of the smaller version of Vue, essentially, right? You know, like how Preact to React is. So I guess the Lucia is something like this to Vue. It has this sort of the Vue-like templates, and then it's just a lot smaller and a lot simpler. Like, I'm not sure if you need that, but if you do, check it out. It seems nice. So like the docs are pretty good. The library seems pretty well maintained, and there's like tests and everything. So yeah, honestly, don't have much more to say about it. Okay, continuing with use model validation. They store data in a model and validate that data anywhere. This, even though it has the naming similar to React hooks, it's actually a standalone library that allows you to just define models and then validate any data using that model. So it's just, you know, the data shape validation library. Seems okay. Like, I don't know how it would fare against something more established like Joy, for example, but seems decent. So if you're looking into validation and wanted something like this, do check this one out. Continuing, we got eloquent-ffmpeg. This is high-level API for ffmpeg command line tools. So instead of, you know, there's been a bunch of projects we already looked at that essentially compile the ffmpeg or subset of ffmpeg to either WebAssembly or to Node modules. This one instead just takes the approach of, hey, so this is my ffmpeg binary, and I will just give you a nice API that allows you to define input, output, and then just execute that ffmpeg binary and get the results out of it. Nothing super complex, but it seems like, you know, nicely designed API. Definitely better than writing the command line input yourself. Maybe will save you some problems with working with that. All right, continuing, we got react-linky, a React component to find URLs and emails in text and turn them into HTML links. Just as it says, you basically wrap any text you have into linky and it will do everything else for you. Super straightforward, seems, you know, nice. Again, you know, it's a very limited use cases, but if you have them, do check this one out. Next thing we got here is Chat UI Kit React. Build your own chat UI with React components in minutes. So it's a UI kit that is specifically tailored for building chats. If you're building a lot of chats, do check it out. I mean, the UI actually looks very nice. Again, you know, it's a very, very specific use case, but hey, that exists essentially. Okay, continuing, we got encryptlab. Free and comprehensive encrypt and decryption tools. Okay, let me try that again. Free and comprehensive encrypt and decrypt tools website with example code in Node.js. So essentially, it's just a kitchen sink of different encryption methods that you can run in on web and in browser. In browser and in Node. And yeah, it just has stuff like, you know, the triple DES, RSA, Blowfish, Twofish, IAS, and all that kind of things. And it just shows you how exactly to run all of that either in the browser or in the Node.js, including example codes, and then allowing you to do that in place here, which is kind of nice. So if you're interested in encryption and wanted to try and encrypt something in the browser or Node.js, do check this one out. It's a really good example. All right. Continuing, we got aleph.js. This is a React framework in Deno that is heavily inspired by Next.js, and basically it's sort of a Next.js clone built on top of Deno instead of Node.js, which, you know, I guess it's kind of cool to see something like this. And honestly, not sure why you would pick something like this right now over Next, because, you know, Deno is in the very early stages and this framework is in the very early stages, but it does have most of the features that Next has. So if you really wanted to do something with demo, then do check this one out. It actually seems pretty good. Okay. Continuing, we got eslisp, an unopinionated S-expression syntax and macro system for JavaScript. If you ever wanted to write some Lisp in JavaScript, now you can. I honestly have no idea why this exists and why would you want that, but yeah, this allows you to build Lisp macros in JavaScript, and if you wanted more curly braces, or sorry, more braces in your JavaScript, this is a way to do that. I have no idea why, but that's the thing. Right, continuing, we got Folio. So this one is pretty cool. This is from Microsoft, and it's a customizable test framework to build your own test framework. So this seems to be the base, the foundation, I guess, for the Playwright test runner that they are currently building. And what I found cool is that essentially it allows you to build your own asynchronous fixtures. So before running tests, you can define your fixtures, such as, fixture database, fixture table, whatever. And then the fixture, what it does is essentially it allows you to, in a function. So, okay, so here's the thing. Most of the test frameworks allows you to define whatever fixtures you typically run, right? Most of them have those methods that you can do like before all, after all, before each, after each, and so on and so forth, right? The problem is when you do that, you sort of scatter your your various initialization and destruction methods all around the place, right? So to initialize the database, you have to do it like, okay, so we're going to connect before all, and then we're going to tear it down after all. And then for tables, we're going to do it before each, and then we're going to do it after each, which, it works, but it's a bit of a pain in the ass. And, if you have a lot of things that you need to set up and tear down, this becomes relatively hard to manage. So what they did with the Folio instead is they allow you to define a fixture like database, right? And then you literally have an asynchronous function that does it sequentially. So essentially you just, create a database. Then you have this run function that is passed to this init function, which you can just run with database passed to it, right? So this will wait for all the tests to run. And then you can just dispose of it as if you were just running a function, which is super neat approach. I really like that. And the same goes for, pretty much anything else. So, again, you got dependencies on the other fixtures, and it looks really cool. And you can see that they were building this for Playwright because, Playwright is the Puppeteer equivalent from Microsoft. It does a lot of asynchronous work, so it's not as easy to do testing with it because you have to wait for all this, to start the browser, open the window, load the website, and doing it like this is going to be a big pain in the ass. This is a lot nicer. I'm curious to see if Jest would probably add something similar to them because it seems like a really, really nice pattern in testing. So I'll be curious to see how this develops. But anyway, if that sounds interesting, do check Folio out. Right, continuing, we got handsfree. So this is a really, really neat example. This is a library, sort of a wrapper around the computer vision models that allows you to work with face pointers, assistive text, and creative expressions. Essentially, it's sort of the library that allows you to tap into the webcam and make your website navigatable hands-free, right? So there's some really cool demos here. It's really awesome. Obviously, I'm not exactly the best person to talk about that as I never really worked with assistive technologies that much. But this just seems awesome. So there's some really cool demos here. And I think the original one I've seen was on Twitter where the author showed how he did some visual programming using basically his eyes and nose, which was pretty amusing to watch, but also really, really cool. So if that sounds interesting, do check it out. It seems really cool, really great. Okay, and the last thing we got here for today is boxed nodes. This is an alternative to PKG, I guess, that basically allows you to bundle together the JavaScript with Node.js into a single binary that you can just ship to anywhere you want, essentially, and then it's going to be like a CLI tool that you can just run, right? Seems nice. Again, more alternatives is better. I wonder how it will fare in compared to the PKG and NXA that are, a lot older and has been around for quite some time. Obviously, there's always limitations around those projects, so you have to keep in mind and make sure that your final version actually works. But when it does work, it's actually really nice. And you can ship 40, 50 megabyte binaries with Node.js that you can just zip and send to wherever you want, basically, which is super convenient. Right. That's actually it for libs and demos. Now we're coming to the interesting and silly stuff. First, we got the interesting thing. There's the Origami Simulator that is written in WebGL. Unfortunately, not open source, but it's a really, really cool example of what you can do with WebGL, basically. And yeah, it's really good. And you can do some very silly things here. Anyway. I mean, just, play around with it. There's like a bunch of different patterns, examples, and things you can navigate. And yeah, the origami, like the visualness of origami is super cool. I think it makes understanding how exactly the origami works pretty damn nice. But yeah, again, unfortunately, it's not open source, but whatever. Really cool demo. Right, last thing we got here is this abomination from Ben of Odds. That is, so yeah, so he built the stories for Visual Studio Code. I don't know why this exists, but yes, you can get stories the same as, Instagram or whatever in VS Code, and I don't know why. But that's the thing. So if you ever wanted to have some more Facebook, I guess, in your VS Code, now you can. That's basically all I have to say about it. So there we go. Anyway, that's actually it for today. So if you got any questions, suggestions, your projects that you want to share, do feel free to throw them into the chat right now. If not, we can just wrap it up here. As usual, you can find all the mentioned links on the GitHub. You can find them also on bxjs.dev. You can join our Discord and chat about any of that if you are watching the video of this or didn't get to ask your question. You can, what else? You can follow me on Twitter if you want to for some video game shit posting and some JavaScript stuff. And you can follow the Telegram channel if you want unfiltered list of news that I gather over the week, because some of them don't actually make it here. That's basically it from my side. So let me have a look at the chat. Did you see the last video of Rich about Svelte? No, I have not actually looked into the Summit videos yet, but I will, because it seems like there's quite some news. If you can share the link somewhere, that would be good. I'm not sure if YouTube will let it through, but just if you're on Discord, just throw it in there. Would be more than interested, basically, to have a look at that. Watched his video yesterday. Ben Avad is funny. That is true. I mean, his videos are typically quite amusing. Okay, any more questions, suggestions, or shall we just wrap it up here and go play some Watch Dogs, I guess? Or I guess try to play some Watch Dogs, because that stuff still keeps crashing for me. God. Okay, I'll give you a couple more seconds. Meanwhile, what else? I think I don't really have anything else to say. So once again, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support, your donations, your kind words. All of that stuff is basically what keeps me going. And yeah, Snowpack is OP. I gotta try it at some time. Like, I've seen the docs, I've read through the tutorial, and it looks amazing. We gotta stream Snowpack at some point because it looks amazing. Anyway, seems like no more questions or suggestions. So once again, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the stream. Have an awesome rest of the weekend, or rest of the week if you're watching the video of this. And then I see you on Wednesday for the BxJS dev stream.